Hi everyone, and welcome to another advanced C1 level English class with Richard. And today we will be talking about obligation using have to or must. So there are two main ways we can talk about obligation or necessity in English. The first is using have to. For example, I have to go now, which means it's necessary or it's obligatory that I leave now, that I go now. The other main way of talking about obligation is to use the modal verb must. And we can say, I must go now. So first of all, let's look at have to, and then we'll look at must and the differences between have to and must. So let's begin with the structure. In order to use have to talk about obligation or necessity, we need to use the subject, we need to use the two words have to, and we also need to use the base verb. So for example, we can say, I have to go to work. If the subject is the third person, we need to use subject plus has to plus base verb. So here we say, he has to go to work. So it's I, you, we, they have to go to work, or he, she, it has to go to work. So before I continue, I need to talk about the pronunciation, because no native speaker says, I have to go to work. We don't say have to. We don't pronounce have to as have to. We normally say have to. I have to go to work. Listen carefully. I have to go to work now. I have to go to work now. This is what you are going to hear in the real world.
I have to go now.
And in the case of has to, it's more like has to. He has to go to work now. He has to go to work now. Nobody is going to say he has to go to work now. People or native speakers don't speak like that. He has to go to work now.
He has to go right now.
So let's look at some examples. We have to follow the safety rules. It's an obligation. He has to pay his taxes every year. It's an obligation. Can also ask questions about obligations using have to. Do you have to go to work today? Or does he have to go to work today? Notice in the third person, it's does he have to, not does he has to. Examples. Does he have to do his homework? Do you have to pay your taxes? With a question word. What do we have to do today? Notice always the pronunciation. What do we have to do today? Not what do we have to do today? The words are joining together. What do we have to do today? This is why sometimes it's very difficult for learners to understand native speakers. What do we have to do today?
What do we have to do all day?
That is the natural way for me to speak. Now, have to can also be used in other tenses. For example, we can use it in the past simple. I had to work yesterday. We can also make a question in the past simple. Did you have to work yesterday? You can put it in the present perfect. I've had to work a lot today. Notice here that I am contracting the first have, which is the auxiliary verb being used in the present perfect. But I cannot contract have in the present simple. I can't say I have to work today. I have to say I have to work today. We can also use have in the future simple with the modal will. I'll have to call her tomorrow. And we can even use it with other modals, and we can say I might have to work tomorrow. So have to is very versatile. We can use it in different tenses, and we can also use it in questions. Later on, we'll see that we can also use it in negatives, but it has a different meaning in negatives. Before we move on to look at must, I want to look at another structure which we can also use instead of have to, and that is have got to. So this is formed with the subject plus have plus got to plus the base verb. For example, I have got to go to work, or we have got to go to work. In the third person, it would be has to plus base verb. She has got to go to work. She has got to go to work. Again, the pronunciation is I've gotta. I've got to go to work now. That's the natural way for me to speak. I've got to go to work now.
I've got to go.
Or he's got to go to work now.
He's got to go.
That's what you're going to hear. So this is an informal way of saying have to, very common in spoken English. Instead of saying I have to go to work now, many people in informal English would simply say I've got to go to work now, or he's got to go to work now. Can also use it in questions. Have you got to go to work now? Has he got to go to work now? So in informal spoken English, it's very common to use this structure instead of have to. Okay, let's move on to must. So must is a modal verb. So like other modal verbs, we just use it with the base verb. I must go now. So when talking about obligation, we can say I must go now. We can say I have to go now. Or we can say I've got to go now. All of them are talking about things that are obligatory or necessary. What's the difference? Well, the official difference is that when we use must, it's because the speaker feels the obligation is necessary. The authority is from the speaker. I must go now. This is a self-imposed obligation. I am creating the obligation, something that I feel I must do. Whereas when we say, I have to go now, or I've got to go now, this obligation comes from an external source, from another person, an authority, or circumstances. Let's look at some more examples. The doctor says to the patient, you must stay in bed until you recover. The doctor is the authority and he is making the rule, so he uses must. But later, when I'm talking to my friend, I say, the doctor told me I had to stay in bed until I recover. So here I am reporting this to my friend. Actually, this is reported speech, but that's another subject. But I would say the doctor told me I had to stay in bed because the doctor is the external authority. The obligation is coming from an external source, in this case, the doctor. So another example, I must visit my mum. It's something that I feel. Maybe I haven't seen my mum for a long time. Or I have to visit my mum because she's sick. It's an external circumstance. We must leave now. I've decided it's important. We have to leave now because the last train is at 10. It's an external circumstance. I don't control the last train. So I must go now. I have to go now. I've got to go now. I've told you the rule. But the reality is that in modern English, must is less and less used. We can say, I must go now. We can say, I have to go now. And we can say, I've got to go now. In real life, there really isn't much difference. And most people now, in 2026, most native speakers would either say, I have to go now, or I've got to go now, even if it's something they decided themselves. So the grammar rule is becoming a little bit outdated. In most situations, you can use have to instead of must. In fact, must sounds a little bit too formal, too pompous. It's a lot of the time, it's a question of style. For example, you must stay in bed until you recover. You have to stay in bed until you recover. You've got to stay in bed until you recover. Depends who's saying it and what the context is. A doctor would probably say you must stay in bed until you recover, because a doctor is an authority and he's being formal. But if you were saying it to your friend, you'd probably say you have to stay in bed until you recover. I guess must is a little stronger too, a little bit stronger. If you say you must stay in bed, depends how you say it. You must stay in bed, that's stronger than saying you have to stay in bed. But if you were talking to your friend, you could just as well say, you've got to stay in bed until you recover. It depends on the context. In most situations nowadays, that is today, in 2026, I would recommend using have to, or in informal English, you've gotta, rather than must. Another thing about must is that must only exists really for the present. For example, I must go now, or possibly the future. I must visit my mum tomorrow. There is no past, there is no present perfect. We can't use it in any other tense. So the past of I must visit my mum is I had to visit my mum. And it's the same with the other tenses, the present perfect. We have to use have to. Now, everything that I've told you so far applies to spoken English. When we're talking about written English, for example, formal contracts, formal notifications, must is the word that would be used. For example, these are some signs. Hard hats must be worn on this site at all times. You would not see a sign that said hard hats have to be worn. In spoken English, it would be fine to say to somebody, you have to wear a hard hat, or you've got to wear a hard hat, or even you must wear a hard hat if you want it to be more formal. But if it was a sign like this on the wall, it would have to say must. Here's some other examples. All visitors and contractors must sign in here. Or all children must be supervised by an adult at all times. Again, if you were talking to someone, you could say, children have to be supervised by an adult, or children have got to be supervised by an adult. But if it's written, we use must. Another use of must, which is not about obligation, is, for example, if person A says, where's John? Person B can say, he must be at work. Here, this is not obligation. This use of must is for deduction, strong deduction. If I say he must be at work, that means I don't know that he's at work, but I'm 99% sure that he's at work. I could say he might be at work, in which case I would only be maybe 40, 30 or 40% sure that he was at work. But if I say he must be at work, I'm nearly 100% sure that he's at work. This is an assumption. It's a different use of must. Another place that's very common to use must is with the verbs remember, or in the negative with forgot. I must remember to do my homework, or I mustn't forget to do my homework. That's more like a fixed expression. People don't normally say I have to remember. And the second one, which is in the negative, brings me to the final part of this video, which is the negative. So the negative of have to is do not have to. So for example, they do not have to use a computer. Or in the third person, he does not have to use a computer. And the negative of must is he must not use a computer. So again, we use the contractions. We don't say you do not have to. We say you don't have to. We don't say she does not have to. We say she doesn't have to. And we don't say you must not. We say you mustn't. But in the negative, you don't have to use a computer and you mustn't use a computer are very different. When we say you don't have to use a computer, we mean the use of computers is not necessary, but you may use one if you wish So don't have to means something is not necessary, not that it's prohibited. If we want to talk about prohibition, we need to use mustn't. You mustn't use a computer. That means you cannot use a computer under any circumstances. So whilst we've seen in the positive, must and have to are very similar, in the negative, they are very different. Okay, and with that, I've finished this class. I hope it's been useful, and I hope to return very soon with some more advanced English classes. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.